Oaks Avenue. And I have with me Pastor Kennebrew, who has been the senior pastor here for 11 years, and former Assembly member Chris Holden, who is now serving as the CEO of LA Fire Justice. We're going to ask some questions related to the lawsuit against California Edison and why we feel like it's important for the community to be involved. So to kick off, I just want to ask you both, in your own words, why you felt this effort was important and why you got involved.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Timmy. And I want to first of all thank all of you from LA Fire Justice for being here. I want to thank all of our viewers. I'm going to ask you to like, to comment, and to share. Invite somebody else who has been impacted by the Eaton fires. I know for myself, the night of January the 7th and even the morning of January the 8th was probably the most daunting experiences that we could have had. Being a resident of Altadena, leaving my house on January the 7th because I heard that there were fires. And we came here to this facility. I slept in my office until about 3 a.m. And then my wife was telling me, hey, we've got to get up and we have to go. I'm not going to be as dramatic as that night was, but it was very dramatic. But by 6 a.m., the drama turned to trauma. And it was traumatic because we drove back in here to see the back building burning and the back of our building burning and to see our community burning and to experience all of the hurt, all of the pain, all of the trouble, looking at what seemed to have been an apocalyptic situation. And when we experienced all of those things, all we could think about was the destruction, the carnage, and the damage. Later on, to find out that it was because of someone else's negligence, that someone did not do what needed to have been done in order to protect the entirety of our community, that was the worst case scenario for us. It was my greatest hurt, my greatest pain, my greatest disappointment. And when I found out that there was going to be a lawsuit launched because of the destruction, I thought, this is what I need to be a part of, because every belonging that I had was now damaged, destroyed, and or unrepairable. My mother and father-in-law's house, my cousins' houses, my neighbors, my friends, church members, all of the above, there was so much damage done. And we were in a state of disbelief. And while we're in a state of disbelief, the insurance companies were trying to cut out, and people who were responsible was not trying to take responsibility. And so that's why.
Mr. Holden.
First of all, let me say my appreciation. First, let me just share my appreciation for Pastor Kennebrew and First Lady Kennebrew for creating this opportunity, this space for us to have continued dialogue and connection on how this devastating event has altered the course of direction for the community of Altadena primarily, and then of course Sierra Madre and portions of Pasadena were also greatly impacted. A year and a half ago, when the fires broke out, I was at home with my wife, and we saw on television that there had been a fire that broke out in Altadena. And we just thought that, in the hills, we've seen it so often over the years, fires break out and then they make their way into the canyon. But however, this was being covered differently. There was reporting that was saying that neighborhoods and homes were being impacted by the blaze, and that the fire department and others were trying their best to suppress the blaze, but because of the high force winds and the debris and the embers were moving around as if it was a war zone, starting fires all over the area. And the ironic part of this is that even though we didn't expect this to ever happen, there were systems that were in place that should have been able to respond more appropriately when something like this did happen. So when notices didn't go out, and we were hearing about the fact that it was burning in the eastern part of Altadena initially, but the wind shifted and made its way to the western part of Altadena. And we learned after the fact just how catastrophic impact that had on folks who were waiting to hear that there was time to evacuate. The utility we didn't know at that time was the ignition site of the fire. We just knew there was a fire, and we were starting to experience the smoke as it was making its way down to our neighborhood, well outside the burn zone. And with that, it became clear that we might be in jeopardy, that this fire was not only outside of the canyons, but it was down in the community, in an urban community, a densely populated urban community. And now we were getting reports from folks that we were getting calls from the fire department in Pasadena that it was making its way to Woodbury. You can imagine the thinking in our mind that if it's making its way to Woodbury, it was destroying a lot of property and a lot of homes, and a lot of people were being impacted along the way. We then found out later that evening that there was a potential that it could make it to Washington Boulevard. Mm-hmm. With the smoke that was coming into our home, it became clear that we needed to evacuate as well. Right. Now, looking at where we are, that night was traumatic, but the trauma just continued as the days wore on. And when we realized that this fire was one that could have been stopped and never happened in the first place, if the utility had just turned off the power like they were instructed in their manuals to do, then we would have just had wind damage. Mm-hmm. What it exposed going forward was a utility that was negligent.
Yes.
Ultimately, they put profit over safety. Mm-hmm. We had insurance companies that failed us after spending years of paying into a system to expect to get what we expect back to cover us in our rebuild, if that's what we needed to do, to have that cut in half, to have the federal government decide that all of a sudden they are not going to clean up toxic soil.
Yes.
These are the things that, for me, resonate now, and that we have to work collectively as a community, not only to rebuild, but to really hold these corporations accountable, because they have a responsibility for safety, and they have a responsibility to make sure that they're giving back to the community for which they put in resources so that they can survive and thrive and move forward after a disaster like this. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm prayerful and thankful that in the days after the fire, that you and so many in the faith community bound together, donation centers sprung up all over the community. You were in there with your sleeves rolled up, meeting the basic needs that folks had at that time. They couldn't even think about rebuilding. It was about, how do I survive today? Right. And you were there. God bless you, and thank you for that. That's what community is all about.
Thank you so much, Mr. Holden. And I want to, first of all, thank the team, thank Timmy and Zaria and Janet and Dr. Riddle and all of you. I want to thank you for being that community support on another level, because we are looking at long-term recovery now. We did the immediate, and we helped with the basic needs. And I want to make sure that I say this, that Mr. Holden, he's not just the CEO of LA Fire Justice, but he is, I don't want to use the word a victim, but that's kind of what he is. He was affected by the Eaton fires. he, in my heart, is still my assemblyman. Because even though he's no longer in the seat of the assemblyman, Chris Holden, he is fighting for those in our community for equality and for help and for assistance. And so if I may take a little bit of time, because what we call this is conversations. And so we really want to get into the conversational piece. When you were our assemblyman, you saw the devastation that was going on with PG&E and the problem that they had when they set Northern California on fire. And I shouldn't say it like that, but that's really what it is. And when we think about the negligence of the utility company, if that was anybody else, they would call it arson. And an arsonist is a criminal. And it's almost criminal that those who have been affected by the fires, and those of you that are in the community, you can still come down. We still want to welcome you in. But it's almost criminal. But you set some things in place as our assemblyman that was supposed to be a safeguard and a protection. Can you tell us a little bit about the assembly bill that you had written while you were the assemblyman for this area?
Yes, thank you, Pastor. It's interesting how your life unfolds the way that it does. That's when you know you're really not too much in control of it, that God is.
Yes.
And when I was on the city council and we were dealing with a publicly owned utility that was going through a deregulation of the industry, which was going to make it difficult for a public utility to survive, it was called cutting our teeth in a moment of making sure that we were doing all the right things to keep Pasadena Water and Power in business, serving the time as a member of that committee and chairing the committee. We started to see wildfires pick up, and not only pick up with ferocity, with power that were devastating. They turned from natural wildfires to catastrophic wildfires. We saw some of the largest wildfires in the history of the state during that time from 2017 to 2020. And what we saw as the underlining connector was utilities that either had not secured their power line and their poles, and so that when the wind picks up, hurricane forces, it was ripping those poles and taking them across the canyons, and those live wires were what was igniting the flames. Edison was also, PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, the Northern California investor-owned utility, was responsible for a gas explosion in San Bruno, which killed many people in that neighborhood. As a result of that, there was a situation where they were found criminally negligent.
Okay.
That was really the start of the fall for them. The Camp Fire, among many before that, which reduced their stock value to junk bond, became sort of the centerpiece of utility companies that were finding themselves unable to then pay for the damages that they had caused. They went into bankruptcy. We needed to figure out a way to get them out of bankruptcy. The bill was called 1054. It was essentially designed to make sure that the utility was going to be stable. It was the largest utility in the country. If it stayed in bankruptcy, then it would have destabilized our market. Edison would have followed suit. San Diego Gas and Electric after them. To have all three utilities in bankruptcy would have devastated our economy. 1054 was designed to create a pathway for a utility when they cause a fire to have a fund that was in place, which ultimately was a $21 billion fund. $10.5 billion from the shareholders, $10.5 billion for the ratepayers. That fund is still in place today. We were able to create a pathway for Edison to get out of, for PG&E to get out of bankruptcy. But once they did, they had to change their culture. They had to replace their executive team. They had to be able to start demonstrating that they were going to be more about safety over profits. And they were doing a good job based on that, because they were not looking to go back into a bankrupt situation. So that those resources just happened to be in place, fast forward from 2020 to last year, that Edison has available to them to make sure that the victims of the fire that they created had the resources to get built back up to a community that they were looking forward to coming back to. The problem is that Edison still is about profit over safety.
Okay.
They could have released some of that money now, so that people who are suffering now could have access to it now, instead of waiting to a settlement. Advance the money. People who are still sitting in their cars, advance the money.
Yeah.
People who are still homeless, advance the money. And then when we come together and negotiate a deal much greater than what they're offering under this compensation plan, then people will have, then they can just take that out of what their settlement would have been.
Right.
They chose not to do that. So the bill was designed to create a safeguard for the victims of these fires, but also a pathway for the utilities not to get in bankruptcy. And I just think that to a large extent, Edison has not lived up to their part of being a good neighbor and doing what was responsible to make sure the utilities were safe.
All right. Well, you know, I'm so glad that you brought up my next question in the conversation because there are two schools of thought. The first school of thought is Edison is saying we are not saying that we're guilty, but since you think we are, we're going to offer a compensation package. Now, first of all, I just want to stop, as I would say if I was preaching today. Let me stop, park, and pause and give a little revelation here. Most people, if they are innocent of the egregious thing that you're saying about them, they are not going to chime in and say, since you think I'm guilty, let me appease you, especially with money. They're not going to say, let me appease you, period, but especially with money. But since that's the argument that's on the table, and you brought something up beautifully, that they could issue out checks to people in our community without the settlement, but they are choosing not to. What can you say to the people that's hurting right now, and they're saying, I want to go with the Edison settlement? How do we handle those questions?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's one that we wrestle with every day because we know on the other side of this there is going to be the settlement. Edison cannot afford to go to court and be found negligent because they actually would be found grossly negligent of the way that they handled the situation. And if they're grossly negligent, they don't have access to the fund. It comes 100% out of their shareholders contributing to paying off the community, which then puts them right back in a situation where they run out of money and then they feel like they need to go into bankruptcy, et cetera, et cetera. We have to try to encourage folks to hang in there because we do believe this is going to pay much more than what they're being offered through this compensation plan. But we also find ourselves in a tough position because when people are saying that they're hurting so much, that they're feeling so much pain and they are dealing with financial jeopardy that they can't wait, then we can't tell them to wait. We have to say it is in your best interest, do what you need to do, but I think that's the best way we can communicate it in the moment.
All right. I do want the viewing audience to know that there are questions and answers or comments. If you ask them in the chat, ask your question in the chat. Do we have some chat questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So both of you have stellar reputations in the community, and I want to know why you felt LA Fire Justice was the right entity to work with in this endeavor.
Well, let me jump into that one. You know, it's funny. I thank you for the question, Timmy. Let me just say this, that when the fire broke out and in the days after, I went online like a lot of people did and saw a lot of advertisement from law firms, which a lot of people did, were very offensive. They were playing on the town burning buckets of money that you can make. It was just terrible.
Yeah.
I got a call from Doug Boxer, who is our California lawyer at LA Fire Justice, and he wanted to meet with me. He knew about the fact that I represented this community in the assembly and in Pasadena for many years, and that I wrote the legislation 1054, which is the kind of the foundational safety net for us moving forward. And he wanted to offer me the opportunity to be the CEO. I was not comfortable initially working for a law firm. First of all, I'm not a lawyer. I just play one in Sacramento. But at the end of the day, I felt it was, as I learned more about the stellar reputation of Doug, Michael Watts, and others who were affiliated with being out there for communities for all these many years and rescuing us from those kind of utility actions and negligence. And then also realizing that, excuse me, my apologies. And realizing that that the community, that LA Fire Justice, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I think it's really important. That must be Edison Collins saying,
Stop talking about us.
Don't hurt us too bad. But for me, when I realized that LA Fire Justice did no advertising during that first 30 days, that they were up in the canyons trying to figure out how the fire started. Because how do you sue someone when you don't know who to sue?
Right.
And when they were able to put together the video footage that they have, which we've all seen the video by now, it became clear that they had integrity.
Yes.
It was clear to me that they were conscientious, and so when Melanie and I went to their first presentation, I felt that this was a good place for me to be, and so I decided that this was, in terms of what I could offer, not as an attorney, but as someone who knew the community, that I could help communicate to the community the trust that I had in the lawyers of LA Fire Justice, and that they are about really meeting the needs of a community that are just and equitable.
Wonderful. So with myself and my wife, we were already signed on with other lawyers. And I had some friends that kept telling me, you need to go to LA Fire Justice. And I was a little reluctant. I didn't know these people. They weren't a part of the community, so I was reluctant. But prior to the fire, not only was I a pastor of this church, I was a community leader. I'm the former Altadena branch NAACP president. And we had a after prison program going on here at the church. So I got a call one day and somebody said, Pastor Kennebrew, do you have some time today? I said, for what? Anybody who knows me, if I drop my voice, you're really on my nerves. So I was like, for what? They said, Michael Watts is in town and he wants to meet you. I said, Michael Watts? I said, you talking about that lawyer from Texas? They said, yeah. I said, babe, Michael Watts want to meet with me. So that's how I went in. And then Doug Boxer shows up at the meeting. And he said, hi, I'm Doug. I said, I know you. You're Barbara Boxer's son. So I'm like, this is serious. This is for real. And they showed me the video in the office on a laptop computer. They said, Pastor Kennebrew, we need you on board. So man, let me pray about it. On the way out the door, I see this 6'7" guy who's familiar. It's a simple, I know that he's not called that anymore. And I said, the Honorable, even when he calls me, I said, the Honorable Chris Holden. His former Assemblyman, Chris Holden. And he shakes my hand. He says, I'm on the team. I hope you can join us. Of course, I respected him from my NAACP days. Anytime we called him, whatever we needed, when there was a police situation, I just had to call his office and they took care of whatever we needed. And so then, like a week or two later, I talked to Dr. Riddle and she said she's on the line. I mean, she's on with the company. I said, wait a minute. Because see, Dr. Riddle, I knew her as Lieutenant Riddle, who showed up at this church when there was a baby shot around the corner. And I said, not on my watch. And we had the cameras and everybody else, and I'm calling the shot callers like, you're not killing babies in my hood. She was here. She's been here for us. So when I talk about these two, they've been here for this community. And I don't think that they're going to lead us wrong. And at that moment, I said, I'm on board. At that moment, I'm a life member with NAACP, but regardless of that, I'm the husband of Jerice Kennebrew, the father of David Kennebrew, and I have to take care of my family. Outside of all of my community things, outside of all of my church engagement, I got to take care of my family. And I thought long and hard, and I said, who's going to have integrity, and I don't have to be ashamed of, and I don't have to worry about hurting my family in the midst of all of this. I went to those that I trusted. And he has been a man that I could trust. She has been a woman that I could trust. So even though I didn't know Michael Watts, and I didn't know Doug Boxer personally, from my experience, Barbara Boxer has been wonderful for us. And so I said, let me join this team. And I haven't been disappointed.
I have a really important follow-up to that. You mentioned that you all were with another attorney before coming over to LA Fire Justice. What was that process of switching over?
Writing a letter. It was almost like changing relationships. I don't want you no more. It was just writing a letter. And I'm glad you asked that question, because there are people that are saying, well, I already have an attorney and all of this. There is no attorney that can make you stay with them. You write them a letter, let them know that you're changing attorneys, and you should receive a letter from them within the next 20 to 30 days. And then we received another letter, I believe it was from the courts, notifying us of the change. Thank you. Can we?
No, I was just gonna add to that. I think we've been very intentional too about making sure that when folks who want to leave their law firm, that they come to us and they let us know that they want to leave. For us to go after them, that would be violating rules of ethics that Doug has to follow as a lawyer, California lawyer. So we were very intentional about, and we've had a number of people who just showed up at events and said, look, we want to change. And so if that be the case, then we can respond at that point.
And I think that that's very key, especially for those of you that are out there that are watching. Maybe you've gotten with a law firm, and now I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not breaking any ethics. I'm a pastor. I'm saying this because I was with another law firm, and they did absolutely nothing for us. You couldn't call into the office and get a voice and talk to someone right away. There were things that we realized we needed to change. And sometimes you have to make those hard decisions about changing. I had a young lady who came here for a resource fair. Zaria and Janet had the booth in the front. And the young lady was so adamant. I don't want nothing else to do with this community, nothing else to do with the fire. I'm sick of all of this. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for so-and-so and this, that, and the other. And I said, look, ma'am, you're here. It happened. What are we going to do? Where do we go from here? There are people who are not engaged in the lawsuit now because they don't think that they qualify. And when she finally calmed down and she talked to me, she said, Pastor, I was a renter. This money and lawsuit that they're talking about is for homeowners. So can you speak to that for us?
Well, I appreciate that. That's a really important question, and it's one that can clarify. So whether you're a property owner or you're a renter, where you're undocumented, or whether you're documented or not, you have a case if you were impacted by this fire. I think it's also important to note that in some instances there are family members who live in the home and have not filed a case, even though maybe the parents have. It's important that anyone who was in the home who had impact from the fire, that they have a case as well. So children who were in the family, and I think a lot of times that what we're looking at and seeing is that there's sort of a drop off of where there should have been more people signing up from a particular home. So I think just putting that word out there that if they have lived in a home with others who have filed a lawsuit, more than likely they have a claim as well.
I know we do our best not to scare people, but we do know that the statute of limitations is coming up in 6 months. It's just a fact. Can you talk a little bit to the benefit of people signing up sooner than later?
Thank you for that question. I think it's important to note that there was a 2-year statute of limitation. If we're into a year and a half of that 2 years. So January 7th of next year is the 2-year mark. Pastor, and maybe you can speak to this, when you come to LA Fire Justice, you sit down with a caseworker who then spends time going through meticulously, sometimes painfully, remembering the things that you lost.
Yes.
And then assigning value to that. The reason this time frame is so important, that even though the statute of limitation ends in January of next year, folks need to come in and be able to sign up, but also then to be able to come in and get their case worked up with the caseworker who can then establish the value of their loss, because that is where we're going to hold Edison accountable. Where Edison's down here with this compensation plan that is paying pennies on the dollar, and folks got claims that are up here, that's where we want to land. And so maybe you can talk about what you had to go through.
Right. And when you go to LA Fire Justice, make sure you carve out some time. I was under the impression this was going to take about 20 to 30 minutes. And then I was also under the impression that I was going to be able to just do it. And it will get very tight, very emotional. Even when I went there to do my interview, there were times I had to stop the interview for the video that we did. There were times I had to stop during the video. I had to take a breather. I had to sip some water. I had to walk around. Because at that moment, most people don't realize that when you lost, you didn't just lose a home. If you were a renter, you didn't just lose a space that you were renting. And when you're going through and you're thinking about the pictures of the vacations that you took, the memories of family members that are no longer here, it's not about the picture, it's about who's in the picture. It's about the frame. Sometimes it's about the thing that was passed on to you from a family member. And that's what the Edison compensation package doesn't show you. That you would connect. Let me just talk about a man who was a member of this church. His name was Elder Maurice Walker. He was the same age as my mother. And Elder Walker, before he died, had given me a gold watch because I love watches. But this was one of the old school watches that hang from your vest because he was a haberdasher. That's a male clothier. And he gave me that watch. He said, "You're like a son to me, and I love you like a son." He said, "I want you to have this watch." And it was a watch on a chain. So when I was writing all of my items that I lost, I had to add that watch into my watch collection. Now, my wife bought me a new Invicta, and she's replaced some of the things that I've lost. But that's irreplaceable because he died before the fire. And so with that comes what's called an emotional attachment. So what you cannot pay me out when you say things, that's called pain and suffering. And the law firm had to help me with the pain and suffering, the emotional distress, the damage that my son experienced, thinking that his parents died in a fire because he didn't talk to us for hours, because he had gone to LA to go to work. My son has his own case, and this is what you were talking about. My son lived in the back house. He's 25 now. He was about 23, 24 when that happened. So even though he was an adult, he still has his own case, and he matters. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. Their children, your children have their own case. This is every person in that house, they had a case. Can I ask you a question? Okay. What type of physical and emotional injuries can I recover from?
Well, if there was emotional, is probably the one that I think has the potential to demonstrate just how threatening this fire was to you. Certainly having people who left their home and with the expectation of going back the next day and seeing their home there. Some would say, I just grabbed a few things and then I left with the expectation that they would be back. Then there are some that left at the very moment their house was on fire. So they were fleeing the flames, which was creating another type of trauma in their experience. All of that has value in this case. Having someone who we encourage to seek professional support, so a lot of those encounters can be documented and be part of the case and be able to present at the appropriate time so that there's evidence of what that trauma represents. But there are people who are still traumatic, dealing with trauma and some physical ailments. The smoke is now just sometimes affecting people now.
Yes.
I don't necessarily, let me just point this out. 19 people died in the fire.
Yes.
That's a different kind of impact. Recorded. We have found out in the days and months and now years since then, the untold number of people who have committed suicide.
Yes.
There are unknown number of people who, I met someone 2 weeks ago, and the gentleman was telling me about his wife who just passed away. She was dealing with a pulmonary issue, and they know it was attached to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of those type of anecdotal stories that are just showing just how deeply impacting this fire has been. But in terms of being able to document whatever the physical or the emotional injury happens to be, that will also be worked up in the case. I'll also point out too, there are a lot of people that we're representing, they were also small business owners.
Thank you.
And they were operating their business out of their home. So they have two claims, right? They've got for their business and for their residential. Some that were commercial operators and they have their commercial building owners, they obviously can be a part of this lawsuit as well as their tenants. So on the business side, if there's some connection there, there's opportunity for them to file a case. I just wanted to get that part in. But yes, what you described is also covered by the caseworker in terms of what the physical and emotional injury is and what one has to do to make sure that we can make the strongest argument behind it.
Now, this is a very important question. And I'm asking this question, and this is something that happened in the very beginning of me being with LA Fire Justice. One of my pastor friends called me up. He said, man, we need to lead this company, we need to lead this case along, this thing along, because it's all for the lawyers. The lawyers are going to get all the money. And so I want to ask the question, how do you think the lawyers are going to get paid? And I just changed it up a little bit from our frequently asked questions.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, look, I think that, lawyers, let's put it this way, the corporate interests, who are the bad guys, if you will, who they start the problem, they create the problem, and communities that need to have representation in litigation, because what we see is that the corporations have, in the case of Edison, they have the most high-priced lawyers that you can find on the planet that are representing their interests. Why would it then be offensive for us who've been injured by them to not have legal representation who can go in there and get the best negotiated deal for us? They know better how to work up the deal, they know better how to negotiate the deal, and as it relates to LA Fire Justice, they have the most experienced lawyers, having represented over 20,000 survivors and victims over many decades. And so with that kind of experience, I would want them on my side to be able to represent my interests and get better what I would have been able to get sitting at the table, not knowing the fullness of what I needed, questions I needed to ask, what value of things I needed to put out there to make sure that I was getting compensated appropriately. So I think it is part of, under California law, that Edison will be paying for the lawyers. The fee was part of the standard fees that most law firms come into these cases on. It's like 33 and a third. The market is so large, the competition is so great, and we realized that we needed to step out of where we were to a fee of 25%, which met where everybody else was, but also taking into consideration that work that was already done, we have to do what we have to do. And we made sure that our folks understood that. We made sure that they understood that this wasn't Northern California, this wasn't Lahaina, this was Altadena, California, in an urban area, high-priced homes, working-class families. Many of us now can't buy the homes that we wanted to, come back and own them.
Yes.
So we need to know that as much of what is on the table to settle a case is going to go into the pockets of the folks who were impacted. And so usually that fee is a negotiable fee, but and then the courts are ultimately going to decide what the final number is.
Now, I know you all mentioned the emotional distress claim and all of the long-term solutions that people will see through the lawsuit. My question is, people are struggling with their mental health now, they have questions about their insurance now. Can you talk a little bit about the services that LA Fire Justice offers along the way?
There are 182 law firms that are representing folks in the Altadena and the Eden fire zone. There's only one that has recognized the impact that this has had, the traumatic impact, and the need to step in and do what we can to help provide resources, and that's LA Fire Justice. Now, under the modesty of the person who asked the question came up with an amazing idea that we should have mental health Mondays. Each month, we should bring in professionals and provide expertise so people can come into a safe environment. No one's talking about lawsuits. It's just about being able to connect with how to control the stress, how to deal with the trauma, how to find energy to move forward in their day. And so Timmy was, and along with our whole team, has been very much a part of supporting this. Janet, Zaria, they formed a great team of bringing in professionals. During the end of the year, we did it every week. And as we move forward this year, we're going to plan something that's very large that can bring the community together, because we think that's an important piece that can easily be lost, and it's an area that law firms aren't focusing on.
I love it. I love
Except
it.
LA Fire Justice.
Except LA Fire Justice. I said there's no justice without LA Fire Justice. I want to appreciate all that LA Fire Justice is bringing to the table. And I guess my concern is not just for myself and for my community. And I shared this when I went to a conference and I was the keynote plenary speaker. When I think of my father-in-law, who, and I'm gonna try my best not to get choked, who worked all his life to pay for a house here in Altadena. And he is a Vietnam veteran. And for months, he couldn't stand to see this area because it reminded him of combat. When I think of my father-in-law who raised his family, paid for everything, and now there's a $300,000 shortfall between what the insurance company wants to offer him and what it will take for him to rebuild his house. Really and truly, what you're saying to him is go back to work. He's retired. You've triggered old wounds. Now you've added stress because as a man, and I don't know about the newer men, I know some people just got married and some are looking to get married. I don't know about the newer men, but men of his generation, they took care of all the bills. He don't want his woman working, and he's not working to take care of the bills. But what do you do with the $300,000 shortfall? How do you start? He did not set out to say, I want to build a new house for my family. He had just remodeled his home and was comfortable in the way that it was. So not only are we talking about rebuild with me, hey, I'm young. I am young. I should have got some amens all throughout here. I'm young. So me building and rebuilding isn't him rebuilding. This man is 78 years old. You don't want to try to rebuild his house. And he was they were counting up years the other day. And they said, by the time we're done, we're going to be in our 80s. So for me, the fight is very personal. It's not that I'm saying somewhere beyond the rainbow, or I'm just hearing somebody else's struggle. Because my wife and I, our role and responsibility is not only to take care of ourselves in the community and the church and all of that, we got to take care of her parents as well. I can't see her parents in decline and I'm not doing anything to help. So when we're talking about compensation, we're not just talking about dollars and cents. We're talking about what you just said, emotional distress. And how do we get past this? And how do we get past that? And now, how do we help seniors fill out applications online when they weren't online before? So now the trajectory of everything has changed. So you need to be represented. You need somebody that's going to speak on your behalf when you can't speak up. When you get emotional and choked up, they'll have a level head. And that's all I have to say in closing.
Well, that's a drop the mic moment. I couldn't agree with you more. And as you're talking, we all have had to sort of push down the anger because the anger can overtake us, and then all of a sudden we're in a different place. But when I think of how Southern California Edison, recognizing all of what you just said, has record profit of over $4 billion in a year, and the CEO is making got a $16.7 million compensation plan. In the midst of all of this, it becomes even more offensive. And then to put up billboards, come in and talk to us and we'll give you the best deal and we'll just give it a try. They know it's pennies on the dollar because they already know that their actuaries have said you got to drive down that exposure. Drive it down. So what they do is they get the regulatory, the CPUC, the California Public Utility Commission, to give them the stamp of approval on their wildfire mitigation plan, knowing that there was debris under the tower, knowing that it was a tower that was inactive and should have been taken down 70 some odd years ago. Knowing all of that, giving the utility the opportunity to say, hey, to Wall Street, look at this. I'm good to go. My get out of jail card. It's offensive. And for the utility to not see that and to play like we want to be part of rebuilding the community, then give your father-in-law $200,000, $300,000 against whatever his settlement's going to be. So he doesn't have to worry about it now. Don't have him go into some little office or downtown in some skyrise and talk to him about, well, we're not negotiating on this, so basically it's take it or leave it. And when you look at it, you say, that's not going to get me anywhere, because they're not even addressing the mental trauma that has been activated by their fire and is now folks reliving pain and suffering. This is why it's a traumatic experience for all of us, because we're all going through this together. And I think this is where our team, with Volante Riddle, who's been, Dr. Riddle, who's been a part of the community for a long time, Zaria, who has a foundation that she started through this process. These are people who work for us, but who care, who are part of the community, who can help shape thoughts and opinions of what we need to do to be responsive. And so I think for the last year and a half, LA Fire Justice, through the programs, whether it's Mental Health Monday, whether it's having our insurance professional come in and help Harold DeLuise, who's been able to help so many people get more out of their insurance company and their settlement, because he was able to go back and find where they left stuff on the table, to be able to have rebuilding workshops and things of that nature. We have gone beyond just being a law firm. But as we move forward now, we're letting everyone know that we are still a law firm. We're going to keep doing all the important things that make us part of community, supporting the nonprofits as we have. But we have a Community Rising Dinner.
Yes.
That's coming up on the 25th of June at the Convention Center in Pasadena. We're going to have some inspirational speakers. Dr. Shirley Weber, who is the Secretary of State, is going to give our keynote. We also have Michael Ocon, who's the Executive Director for the Eden Fire Collaborative, with a host of nonprofits that are part of that, which is part of what you were getting to earlier in terms of what does recovery look like. That's what they do. We'll also have a not only a fire survivor, but an attorney from the Lahaina fire come and talk to us about their experience and how fast they're moving through their process in terms of being able to have settlements in place. And that's 2.5 years since that fire. So there's some good things that we think we'll be able to bring together. But for folks who are not assigned to a law firm, or folks who are and they want to look for a move, they should come to this evening, because I think they'll also get a lot of information that will help them make a good decision going forward. And knowing that with that statute of limitations date out there, we got to get folks in the door sooner than later because of the reasons that you mentioned. It takes the time to work up their case.
Yes.
And every single thing that we can think of that needs to be added into that settlement that is suitable and appropriate to put in, we are going to do that so that folks can make sure that there is we're not sure how we'll get to that 100% mark. But I think that understanding that getting to a settlement is a good thing for the community, and being able to turn the page on this chapter and move forward together. It's all about justice, and we're there to fight for it.
Amen. We have 1 minute before we go off this wonderful time together in conversations. I want to do this. Who should I point to so that they can wrap up? If we were in church, we would be doing altar call right now. But here, who can help us? Who's going to tell us how to
Let's pick the
sign?
senior member.
Come on, clap your hands.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Falante Riddle. You've heard a lot about her. Lieutenant Riddle. Amen. Thank God for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Get up, you can have a seat.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You know, as Mr. Holden said, we're so impacted by this tragedy that it's no fault of our own. This was